It's Monday, March 10th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. And it is, as it always is, a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that is my good friend, Underdog Fantasies, Underdog's ball knower at this point. I mean, you guys are definitely doing way more than just fantasy football over there. It is Hayden Winks. Hayden, what's going on, man?
Doing well, just hanging out. This is the time of the year where I feel like we make strides against other fantasy shows out here. We're grinding free agency and the NFL draft prospects. I was watching offensive tackle tape the other day, so yeah, we're out here grinding.
Absolutely. I've said this to both you and Josh behind the scenes that, I think your guys' show is kind of after the same type of vibe that this show is. That, yeah, we're not just going to sit here and do, fantasy rankings all off season or like stock up, stock down nonsense. We're really trying to get into the nitty gritty of actually knowing football. And if you're not, honestly, I'm just going to say it, if you're a fantasy analyst and you're not doing that, you're missing the boat.
We're coming for you. We coming for you.
Not only are we coming for you, the audience is going to be leaving you, and it's going to be coming here, or at least that's the hope. So again, this is our second mock draft Monday of the season here. We did our first one at the NFL Scouting Combine, where I also had dinner with Hayden. That was absolutely electric stuff there. Great time with all the folks from Underdog. At the Scouting Combine in Indy, we did the first episode with both Nate and Charles. So for a reminder for the new folks how this works, mock drafts, we love them, we hate them, but they are a part of draft season like a moth to the flame. So instead of, going pick by pick through someone's, 12.0 version of mock draft, Nate and Charles are already on 6.0, which is absolutely outrageous for it being only March here. We're just going to talk through some fan fiction and ask the mock drafters out there their 5 favorite potential fits for 5 top prospects this season that they had in their most recent mock draft. We're also going to do stand on the table, where I'm going to ask Hayden one prospect that he wants to stand on the table for. Because Hayden, you know how this works, man. You're doing I don't do mock drafts. That is one foray that you guys have gotten into that I have still held out on. But you're making 32 picks in these things. I know you guys don't always like all 32 picks, but there's got to be some in there that you have some conviction for.
Yeah, what I did on this last one that we're going to be referencing today is I just took all the information from the combine and I just try to sort where I think these players are going to actually go, like kind of set an over under for where they're going to be slotted, and then kind of worked from there, like get these guys in the right range and then look at some of the fit. So like you do a mock draft, you think about it for 2 days and you start realizing, 4 or 5 of these make no sense, but then you lock into about 5 or 6 of these that you feel really good about. So it's actually the perfect show.
Well, I mean, I like to think it was a halfway decent idea last year when we did this thing. The good news is that there's 4 to 5 picks in the actual NFL draft that make no sense and don't end up working out. Honestly, I'd probably take the over on that. But let's waste no more time. Hayden, give me one of your 5 favorite player to team fits from your most recent mock draft.
So let's go with Tet McMillan, who it seems like there's just like varying opinions on. I share the same one that you do, in that he's 6'5", can play X receiver, and also could run in breaking routes. Like that's a pretty nice profile to me. So I'm taking the side of this that he's going to go still pretty high up in the draft. I do think that Jacksonville at 5, Patriots at 4, that's where the party starts for him. But the more I kind of thought about it, the Raiders at 6 is a fit that I do like. And I was reading The Athletic, and they had kind of like an offseason expectations for what the Raiders are doing. And one of the big key takeaways is they want an X receiver, like somebody that can really go out there and win. They have Brock Bowers to do all the stuff underneath, get him in motion. He can be your option route guy, all of that fun stuff. But you also want somebody just one-on-one, 15 yards down the field to get the ball to. And I do think that Tet McMillan does fit that kind of mold. On top of that, the new GM comes from Tampa Bay, who's the very common comp for Tet McMillan. It's Mike Evans. So this is one where if you can't find the quarterback to surround this offense, at least set the next quarterback up, and maybe that's next year, a couple years down the line, with a bunch of pass catchers. You're going to have Brock Bowers and Tet McMillan under contract. To me, this would be a good kind of way if they find a day 2 quarterback that they like, surround them with as much talent as you can on offense, and then kind of see where this thing goes over the next couple years.
Yeah, this is not a common fit for Tet McMillan. I feel like I've not seen this one outside of your mock draft, and I do like it because a lot of the things that you said there, which is there is pass catching talent and just skill position talent on this Raiders team. They've got Brock Bowers, who's a target hog. They have Jacoby Myers, who's a little bit of like he can play all three receiver positions, but he's not really an X guy. He's more of a flanker slot. So they have this opening for the X. They also, Tyler Lockett was released by the Seahawks, which is last week by the time people are listening to this. I think he's a candidate to follow Pete and be like a culture guy with the Raiders, but still that doesn't fit the X receiver need here. And I also point out too that Chip Kelly, I still expect McMillan to mostly be an X, but it was, I love referencing the Jordan Matthews experiment that he pulled off very early on with the Philadelphia Eagles. It's a big receiver who could run those in-breaking routes, who was primarily an outside guy in college, kicked him in to be kind of the first big slot, at least of the last 10 years or whatever. Maybe there's something of that there that they can do with him and just move these guys all around the formation here. I'm just going to ask you, why do you think there's been, I feel like since the combine, is it strictly just because that he didn't run the 40? That's why there's been more negative buzz?
I think that's it. I'm looking for other reasons why there could be. And the funny part about him is these corners, when they're so nervous about Tet just jumping over them 20 yards downfield, that they still are very nervous about getting beat deep. Just it comes in a different way. It's not like he's going to run exactly right by you, but he's just so good at breaking off and slants and breaking routes. He's still good on go balls and post and fades just because of his size. I mean, he averaged 108 and 110 yards per game as a sophomore and a junior. I mean, 21-year-old early declares he was a big-time recruit. I still think that he's an athletic player. It's just not that he's like Brian Thomas level of 4.3s run right by you. But I mean, come on, there's only so many of these 6'5" guys walking the earth right now that can play the ball up in the air like he can. So I just think that he's just going to go high because there's only so many guys in the draft that kind of have this profile. I will say, I did like Jaden Higgins, who's not exactly like this, but that would be like a round 2 version of this. So I think these teams at the top, the Patriots, the Jaguars, the Raiders, these type of teams, I do think that would be the backup plan if Tet McMillan's not for a top 6 pick.
I'm a little mixed on Higgins, but I'm very early on into what I've done with my charting work with him so far. And same thing, honestly, for Tet McMillan. But what I would say here, or T-Mac, he wants to be called T-Mac. I feel like we're just going to end up. You can't pick, but here's the thing, pal. You can't pick your nickname, okay? You can't be going on all the shows and saying you're T-Mac when Tet just works so well. So I'm sorry if I keep calling him Tet McMillan, but I do think he comps well to me as a Cortland Sutton type of X receiver, which is a lot of in-breakers and things like that. So you've got Brock Bowers, you've got Jacoby Myers, you've got Tet McMillan running all these in-breakers with this hypothetical Raiders offense. I like the way this turns out for, insert quarterback here in terms of you're going to get a lot of layup throws. And obviously, if it's somebody with arm talent that can push the ball down the field, you're right that McMillan, even if the speed isn't there, he is still a deep threat because of the way he plays the ball in the air. So, he's not, to me, he's probably not going to come out charting like a top 10 tier 1 type prospects, the Malik Neighbors the Drake Londons. He's not going to fit into that group for me, but he might be close to the top to the next group down, which in this particular draft, and I'm sure this is something you guys have already talked about. It's probably something you're considering when you're putting these mocks together. There's not as many blue chip prospects here. So at some point you're just going to be weighing worse players against guys like Tet McMillan or someone in that vein.
Yeah. When I was setting the over-unders on where I think these guys are going to go, I only had 4 players with a over-under below 7.5. There's this huge group of guys where, they can be the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th overall pick, but they can also be the 14th, 15th, 16th overall pick. And I don't think that we have clear answers on how that's going to go. And I think that's the weakness of this draft is if you do have the 4th pick, the 5th pick, the 6th overall pick, you're usually getting a stud. These guys are really good players, but you're not guaranteeing that these guys are going to be complete superstars. I think that's where the weakness of the draft is the top 10 and not necessarily, I think the 38th overall player to me seems pretty much on average to previous drafts.
All right. I like that first one. Again, it was one that I haven't seen so far. Give me your next one here.
Okay. Steelers, Matthew Golden. So this is a team where I've kind of comped them with some Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe. But if they don't go the quarterback route, they at least need to get another receiver for George Pickens on the other side. Matthew Golden, I think this is the range that he's going to be going to. He was pretty much assumed to be a first round pick, but now I think that he's going to get closer to around the 20th overall. Just looking at the Arthur Smith offense, I think that's kind of links up with what Matthew Golden is good at, more vertical based routes, inside outside versatility from him. He can definitely survive in two wide receiver sets alongside George Pickens on the other side. But I just think like this is what the offense is going to be with Arthur Smith. And I think that's kind of the range that Matthew Golden's going to go in. I don't think that he's a perfect player. His production is just like not first round caliber, like traditionally. But I do think that he was like very crafty in his routes. I'm not sure if I saw the 4.3 speed with him, but he is definitely explosive. And I think that he kind of uses pacing to his advantage and stuff. So yeah, I think that he's more of a 2 than a 1. And I think that we're kind of having that debate with George Pickens, but at some point they have to get serious at the second wide receiver. And I do think like this is the kind of range that Matthew Golden would kind of live in. I like this fit more than like a Mecca, who I think is like more of a traditional kind of slot. And I think that there's a chance that Matthew Golden does play more of a vertical based position.
Yeah, I like this if the field stuff comes true too. And he's back there as the quarterback. I want them to have some sort of speed separation player. Now, I'm with you that I did not see like 4.3 speed from Matthew Golden, but he's certainly somebody that can run. And I think he's a pretty crafty route runner too, with good hands, like wins contested. So we just don't normally see, like, usually the guys that fly at the combine are the ones that have, I don't know, shaky hands, or they're small so they don't win in contested situations. I actually really think that Golden presents kind of like a unique blend of skills in that regard.
Yep. I said the same thing. I said he can win in a variety of different ways. Craftiness is in my notes too. Knack for finding space and zone coverage, explosive downfield target. So yeah, snaps off break. So I think that he's definitely a riser. And I think that there's a chance that Emeka might run the 4.3s according to Daniel Jeremiah. So I don't think that teams have necessarily sorted out who's going to be wide receiver 2, 3, 4, 5 in this draft class. But I would be pretty surprised if Golden's not kind of off the board, generally around where the Steelers are picking at 21.
God, 4.3 Emeka Ibuka. I don't think I saw that one either.
Neither did I. But if that's the type of thing, if it happens and you're like, okay, the leading Ohio State receptions leader all time and runs 4.3s, then all of a sudden we have a draft class.
No, yeah. I think this wide receiver class is getting more interesting with these guys like Ibuka maybe rising up the ranks here, Golden too. And just to bring it back to Golden, I do think there's a chance that George Pickens is not on this roster next year. I think he's a trade candidate this offseason. I know he's irritated some folks in that building. I don't think that's like any sort of breaking news. I mean, watch the damn games. You can tell that there's a little bit of tension there. I think there's a chance he's traded, and frankly, I don't know if I think Golden is a number 1. I actually kind of think he's a little bit of this is not a perfect comparison, but he's a little bit Jordan Addison-ish to me. Crafty player, he's a little bit bigger than Addison, but not perfect size, better hands than you think in contested situations. And I don't necessarily want like Jordan Addison being my number 1 receiver. I don't necessarily want Matthew Golden being my number 1 receiver, but I do think that there's a chance, like if we, from a dynasty perspective, if there's no Pickens on this roster, Golden gets I think in your mock draft, he's wide receiver 2 off the board here. He's the second receiver drafted. It's like kind of a target vacuum. Him and Fields' skill set matchup. I could see him being, the production bros are not going to like it, but I could see him being like a big riser in dynasty rookie drafts in this situation.
Yeah, the production bros just need to realize that draft capital does about 80% of the lifting here, and you can move on.
Speaking of moving on, let's go to your third pick here.
Okay, enough of the fantasy guys. Let's get into the trenches. Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan, to the Chargers. This one's so obvious to me. If Kenneth Grant does fall, and we did not get the athletic testing at the combine, where I do think if he does go at the pro day, he might absolutely light it up, and that he's not going to fall this far. But Jim Harbaugh literally recruited Kenneth Grant, and it was one of his favorite recruits. He was talking about how he's 360 pounds, can run in the 4.9s, in the 40s. So if that's true, I think that there's a chance that Kenneth Grant doesn't make it this far. If he is still available, I don't see him really getting past Harbaugh, because the Chargers have had a run defense problem forever, and Kenneth Grant is massive. And I think there's like this untapped potential as a pass rusher, because there's some movement ability from Kenneth Grant where he can kind of shoot caps at times despite his size. So I do think there's a chance that Kenneth Grant like turns into like a more well-rounded player, like in the Dexter Lawrence range. But I think if you're picking in the 20s, if he's just an awesome run stopper, provides a little bit of juice as a pass rusher, and there's this obviously connection from Harbaugh to Michigan. This is one that I would absolutely.
I like it too. I'll tell you what, fantasy Twitter is not going to like it because everybody's kind of earmarking, let's get some skill position players for the Chargers. Obviously, I think ran out of pass catchers doesn't do it justice in terms of what happened to them towards the end of last season. Hayden, I don't remember like a box score ever looking like that, what we saw with the Chargers and the Texans game where one wide receiver goes for 190 plus yards, and I don't think anybody else cleared 20. So definitely there's going to be a lot of like weeping and gnashing of teeth if we don't get a receiver here, if we don't get a tight end here, if we don't even get a running back here, because I think all those are options for the Chargers. On the other hand, though, didn't we just, especially with receiver, didn't we just learn this lesson last year? I was like about to pull my what little hair I've got left. I was about to pull it out of my head watching Twitter's reaction to the Chargers losing the playoff game. Like, man, it would have been nice if Malik Neighbors was on this team. What the F are we talking about? Like they fixed the receiver problem by getting a guy in the second round. This is not that type of class, I think, from a depth perspective, but they can still attack pass catcher and certainly running back or even tight end on day 2 or day 3.
And when Davante Adams was released, like the immediate reaction from the insiders was he wants to move to the West Coast. There's only so many teams on the West Coast. Chargers, I mean, Davante Adams, like that would be the absolute dream. So we'll see with free agency and kind of how they attack that. But I think Adams plus Ladd McConkey is like exactly what you want to do, like building out a wide receiver room.
Yeah, both guys give you inside outside potential. Both guys are quick separators. Herbert loves to make quick decisions. A lot of trust in both those players. I love it. That is also my favorite landing spot for Davante Adams. And as somebody that moved West Coast to East Coast and regrets it as well, I get it, Davante. I'm with you, buddy. Let's get the opportunity to get back out west. No, but on a serious note, back to Kenneth Grant and the Chargers defense. That is a unit on that side of the ball that I think Jesse Minter and the guys like really outkicked expectations, but just overall getting more blue chip talent, especially on the front where they're likely to move on from Joey Bosa. Khalil Mack is a free agent as well. Obviously he's a different type of player than those guys, but just getting more blue chip talent up front because I think could take that scheme from, really solid. We did a lot with less, but really can start maximizing and weaponizing that side of the ball.
Yep. And sometimes you just need a big dude so you can play the coverages on the back end. Like if you want to be light in the box, like it helps to have a 340-pound guy that's going to be sitting in the A gap. Yeah,
and I mean they were one of the top 3 or 4 teams in terms of 2 high safeties last year, so that's a great point as well. That is not a coaching staff that wants to get barreled over on that side of the ball. They want to be doing the barreling when they have the ball on offense. All right, let's take our first break. When we come back, we will get into the rest of Hayden's picks right after this. All right, we're back. Hayden, we continue rolling on here. Give me your 4th pick, favorite team player to team fit in your most recent mock draft.
So Will Campbell, the LSU left tackle, he was kind of a big storyline at the combine because he's got the T-Rex arms. Now, he is a like 95th percentile athlete, depending if you're tackle, guard. He's a phenomenal mover. He just has like no density, like upper body density.
Yeah.
If you look at his wingspan, like there's just not even anybody in the mock draftable database that played left tackle with his wingspan. So like the question immediately becomes like, do you play him at left tackle? Does he go into guard? Okay. If he is a guard, how often do we see guards in the top 5? I think there's a chance that Will Campbell in this class, because he is such a safe pick, he still goes to like the Jaguars. There's also a chance he slides. This is kind of meeting in the middle. The San Francisco 49ers. They've had guard problems. They have a guard leaving in free agency. He can slide into left guard in year 1. Guess what happens after that? Trent Williams. Is he going to be playing until his 40s? Maybe he does, but there's also a chance that this could be like the last year of Trent Williams too. So you can have a guard in year 1, and then you can do the experiment at left tackle after Trent Williams leaves the organization. So I think there's a chance that Will Campbell is kind of more in the 5th overall to like 12th, 13th overall range instead of like guaranteeing being like a top 6, 7 pick. But the 49ers would definitely use his movement skills. They can get him as a polar, just all the wide zone stuff that they're doing in that offense. And I do think that he has a chance to be a left tackle just because he is such a crazy mover. But he doesn't have to be in year 1, and they can do that experiment. Maybe they find a left tackle next offseason. But I do kind of like these teams. The Bears are another example where you could play inside And then after you kind of figure out, is Braxton Jones a left tackle or not, then you can kind of like hold a little bit of a tryout during the offseason.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. I don't know how realistic it is, just because I think he's one of the best linemen in the draft, and like guard or tackle, people are just going to be thirsty for that. But this particular fit, part of the reason why I like it a lot is he gets to just go and become a guard right away. And most of the analysis I've heard on Campbell, I do think it's kind of weird, Hayden, that like remember last draft cycle, it was, man, LSU's got a tackle who's going top 5 next year.
Yep.
No doubt about it, as we're all watching that great LSU offense. And I think people kind of tried to use a lot of this to discredit Jaden Daniels, which turned out to be pretty bad analysis. But it is kind of hard to square now that was the talking point then. And then, 365 later, it's like, we got to kick this guy to guard. But I think the part of the reason is not only the T-Rex arms, as you mentioned, it's also like he could be a special guard. Like he could be a passable starting left tackle. Braxton Jones, you brought up with the Bears, like maybe that's the range for him. Like maybe he could be a slightly better version of Braxton Jones, who I think is a totally passable tackle, but somebody you could think about replacing. But in San Francisco, he just goes and becomes the starting guard, and he might never get moved out of that spot. It might be like a Zach Martin type situation where people always kind of look at him and think like, oh, maybe he could play out at tackle in a pinch, but or Joe Thuney, who just got traded last week to the Chicago Bears from the Kansas City Chiefs. Like he could probably kick out to tackle, but in this situation, you might just think like, damn, he's crushing it at the guard position. Let's just never move him from there.
Yep. We have Jake Gruden on at Underdog, and he was the coach for Brandon Sheriff when he was drafted, I believe 5th overall, a tackle, but not necessarily tackle measurements, and they just kept him at guard. And I think that I'll have to ask Jay, but I think they had like basically a tryout in training camp for him at left tackle, and they decided, no, you are going to be a guard. And then how many millions of dollars has he made throughout his career? Pro Bowls, all pros. So I think that probably is going to be the trajectory for Will Campbell. But that's totally fine. A high quality guard in this draft inside the top 10, like I think I would give that a passable grade, just because some of the edge rushers and stuff that you're going to be drafting instead, to me, are way more boom bust. I don't view Will Campbell as boom bust at all. It's just, is he a left tackle where it's like impossible to find, or is it guard, high level guard, and you just kind of live with that?
The only thing I worry about with the all right, let's try him at tackle in games, training camp, I think that's actually like an open competition there. I think that's interesting, but like we try him at left tackle and he's just getting smoked, and people are on him on social media for his little baby arms, as if like they're as if they're in the gym absolutely crushing it. They're probably on the couch with a box of Oreos or whatever. So like maybe that starts to kill his confidence a little bit, and then his potential at guard is never realized. That's why I really like this. Not only is it like 11th overall, you're taking a great guard, totally fine, especially in this class, but again, you're just immediately throwing him in there. And I even think some of like the gap stuff that they do with CMC, he would be like fantastic in those situations too. So it's not the sexiest pick in the world for the 49ers, but one that checks a big need, and I actually really like it for the player here.
Let's go.
All right, give me your 5th and final pick here in your most recent mock draft that you loved.
So this one's great timing wise. Joe Thuney just traded away. The Chiefs picking down there at 31st overall. Now, the reason why they haven't had a good left tackle in a bit is because they picked 31st and 32nd overall, and it's hard to find guys in that range to play that position. So Josh Simmons out of Ohio State, I don't know exactly where his range is going to be. He tore his freaking patella tendon. The history of torn patella tendons is nasty, like really, really, really bad, especially for this position. Now, he's an incredible athlete. He's really young, and I don't think that he's going to be drafted nearly as high as he would have if he was healthy. So I think late round 1 is kind of the conversation. There's going to be some teams down there that typically cannot find the upside of a Josh Simmons at this position. And I think like these teams like the Chiefs, who are just like praying for left tackles to fall into their lap, I think this would be like where the risk and the reward kind of meets here. So to me, he was one of the best, if not the best tackle prospect I watched. Now that was only for a couple games at left tackle. But I do think that this team just tried Kingsley Suamatia, but he's probably going to have to kick into guard after watching him live talk about left tackles here to learn on the fly. That didn't go very well.
That did not go well.
No. So I think they go guard with him, and then you try to find a left tackle out there. You don't find left tackles in free agency very often. You typically don't find left tackles in the second, third, and fourth round. You typically only find them in the top 15 picks. So I think that for the Chiefs, this is a team where I think you take on the risk of that injury and see where he is. And then we did at least get some news from Ian Rappaport that he's at least on pace with this recovery.
Yeah, and let's be honest, like he's not ready until week 6 or something like that. Who knows?
No, they don't care anyways.
They don't care.
No.
Yeah, they don't care. Oh, they're not playing our first round left tackle for the first half of the season. We got to figure it out with Wanya Morris back there again, or maybe something a little bit better than Wanya Morris. Some sort of veteran rental. I've even seen some Chiefs fans talk about like, hey, Donovan Smith is healthy now. Maybe he can come back and like start the season as the left tackle. Maybe even just be the left tackle for this season, and then Josh Simmons eventually takes over. You're right. It's kind of a rare opportunity, as if the Chiefs needed more. Right. More things, but like a rare opportunity for them to fix a left tackle problem at 31st overall.
And it's a team that's just like willing to take on risk. We see that all the time.
Yeah.
Like we saw that obviously with the Tyreek profile, Rashee Rice profile. There was obviously Xavier Worthy could have easily looked like a complete non-NFL caliber player just because of his size, and that seems to be working out. So this team just typically takes on some risk. But I can see Josh Simmons also going top 15 just because if a team really wants to find the left tackle, if we're kicking Campbell into guard, there's a chance that Banks goes to guard as well. Like all of a sudden you're like looking for left tackles. You don't really see one. Membu, who's an absolute stud, he's played right tackle only. So if you're a team that's like literally just needs a left tackle, maybe Josh Simmons, this is too late for him.
Yeah, so tell me about Simmons a little bit as a player, because he's somebody I haven't watched. I only just know like the injury profile.
Yeah, he's just a crazy, like he looks exactly how you want your left tackle to look. Like he's not like overweight at all. He only allowed a pressure rate of 4.1% in 2023. He didn't allow a single pressure on his 158 dropbacks this last season. He started at San Diego State, and I think he was actually playing right tackle there, and now he's moving to left tackle, but just an excellent athlete, fluid movement, ability to get out in space as well. Remember, like this Chip Kelly offense, they asked their offensive linemen to do a bunch of crazy things. It's like a very complicated ground game, and he was definitely a focal point of that. So it just really just comes down to the torn patella. I do think that he would be in range for like 4th overall to the Patriots if he was fully healthy and continued to have the season that he was having earlier on.
Yeah, and that Chiefs run game last year was very efficient, but there was 0.0 explosive plays. Most of that is because of the running back situation that they had last year. Isaiah Pacheco going down, Kareem Hunt being, Kareem Hunt at this point in his career. But at the same time, the issues out at tackle, I also think limited their menu in terms of some of these creative pulls and the like explosiveness on the edge. So I think a lot of us, and I think the Chiefs, by the way, are a candidate to take a running back, not in the first round, but at some point here. So if they start the draft off with a guy that Hayden is describing here, and then they come back, let's say in the 3rd, 4th round or something like that, and they grab a potential combatant to Isaiah Pacheco, that's a big win for that player as well.
Yeah, it'd be really fun. They need to get serious at tackle, and obviously they have to get serious at guard too by releasing Tooney.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Hayden has picked 3 trench players in a row here. If you didn't think at the beginning where we talked about, hey, we're not just talking fantasy, we're talking real ball here. He has now proven himself here with these last 3 picks. We're going to take our final break. We come back. Hayden is going to stand on the table for one prospect he absolutely loves in this year's draft right after this.
Captain, my captain. Sit down, Mr. Anderson.
We have Bill's Mafia here.
Let's go! AJ through the table!
All right, we're back. Hayden, this is your time. This is where you're going to show the people your prospect that you're willing to stand on the table for. Metaphorically here, you don't actually have to stand on your desk. I don't know what Underdog's sort of, like comp situation is. If you bust up your work
we can
material.
Find out.
There's only one way to find out. There's only one way to find out. So you can do that if you want, but you don't have to. But you do need to, again, say it with your chest, stand on the table for a player that you absolutely love in this year's draft.
Well, before the combine, it was going to be Armin Membu. And then I think I proved my point. I'm trying to rest my case with what his combine performance was. I think there's a chance he goes really high. Now, I've watched a lot of these quarterback prospects, and I think I'm just going to make the case for that like next tier of quarterbacks. It seems pretty good to me. You can give me Jackson Dart. You can give me Tyler Shuck. You can give me Jalen Milroe. I think all these guys are worthwhile early in the second round, late in the first round if the Steelers want to do it. If the Rams want to find their replacement, I think this is a very good draft to kind of take the chance at the beginning of the second round. So for Jackson Dart, good mover, strong arm. He averaged like 60 rushing yards per game late in the season. He was really good in the scramble department. I think that he needs to work on his progressions, but to me, he like looks the part of an NFL quarterback. He actually reminds me a lot of Sam Darnold. Tyler Shuck is more like a Ryan Tannehill guy. He's played forever, but he's 6'5". They get him under center. He can get up out of his stance and move around a little bit. He runs 4.63 in the 40. I really liked his just throwing mechanics in general. And then I was watching Milroe. I think this is going to be the guy I'm going to be making my case for. I was shocked at how translatable his in pocket decision making and how much the DeBoer offense looks like NFL styled offense. We know how crazy of an athlete he is, but this guy would go through his progressions. He would find his check down on time very consistently. There was nothing in the playbook that they were kind of hiding with Jalen Milroe. I was like shocked at how good in the pocket he was. There's not like drifting into pressure. There's not a sack issue. And to me, he doesn't look all that dissimilar to someone like Anthony Richardson, who's obviously just way bigger.
Sure.
But I mean, I'm looking at an Alabama quarterback with freaky athleticism. I was like watching LSU games and stuff, and all of a sudden he's running by everybody. He ran around Malachi Starks at Georgia. But I just thought like his timing, ability to like work down to the check down and stuff was pretty advanced for somebody that I see continues talked about as super raw. So he has to work on his accuracy. But I think like this kind of like cohort of players, like to me, if it's Shedeur Sanders early or I'm waiting for this kind of group of players, it's not even a question to me. I think that there's going to be a couple starters potentially out of this range.
So, okay, a lot to unpack here. I thought this was going to be a quick and clean one, but this might take a couple seconds to run through here. Okay. So these three guys, Dart, Shuck, Milroe, are you saying these guys are, and maybe it's different for one or the other, but are these more like day two guys you really like, or players that maybe could sneak into the back half of round one?
I don't know where they're going to be drafted. I think all of these guys are going to go top 50, 64. Let's just say by the second round. Now, when I'm doing my like top 100, I'm the sicko. Everyone else says there are big boards where they don't adjust for positional value. So like these guys are like, I would rank Jalen Milroe 78th. You're like, okay, nice. Now, you can also look at it where Jalen Hurts was ranked that low, and you're just not taking into the account, like when you're right, what you get. And I think like I'm going to be ranking these guys inside my top 32 because if you hit on one of these quarterbacks, it is worth so much more than any running back, safety prospect. So I think everyone gets obsessed with like the hit rate and not what do you win when you do win. So I'm going to have a couple of these guys ranked pretty highly. And I need to watch more and more Jalen Milroe because I'm about 5 games through with him. And they look pretty damn good to me. And I've heard a little bit of buzz that teams really like Jalen Milroe. And I think people are just like have seen the interceptions or the fumbles in some key spots and are willing to move on. But I don't know, man. I was pretty surprised at how much the offense looked like an NFL offense under center and the QB power stuff. And they would do some weird zone read plays that were just freaky. So I'm a pretty big fan of Jalen Milroe, and I wasn't necessarily expecting that because I haven't really heard anybody stand on the table for him.
Yeah, I haven't heard very many either. And to be honest with you, man, like I was charting Jermaine Burton last year, which turned out to be a fantastic waste of my time. Thanks a lot to Jermaine Burton. But I was charting Jermaine Burton last year, and Jalen Milroe was a quarterback, and like, this guy doesn't have it. You know, I don't think this is like this is a positional convert. I don't think he's future quarterback. But you've got my like antenna going here about like the growth potentially that we have seen from him and especially in a new offensive system, you know, like a new group of guys coming in there. So Milroe, like that, he's a great example of, yeah, if you're right, you're going to get I'm not saying he's Jalen Hurts. He's going to go to 2 Super Bowls. He's going to win one, but you could potentially get a discount starting quarterback that you build like mobility around. There's a lot there. So I get why he's appealing for like a Tyler Shuck perspective. it's interesting you mentioned like the way you construct your top 50, your big board compared to others, because I've never really thought about it that way, but just consider like, okay, yeah, some safety or whatever. You really like his film. You're not all that high on Tyler Shuck, but like, okay, maybe he just becomes a backup quarterback. Well, the odds are that safety's probably going to hang around the bottom of a roster or be a depth player anyway. So really, it's again, it comes back to what is the upside there. So I've never really thought about it that way, but statistically, you're probably looking at okay, this guy hangs around the NFL a lot longer than insert random backup defender here.
Yeah, and well, that's when I was like looking at just like the history of late first round wide receivers. Like this is a fantasy show, like you guys all know him. It's about a 50-50 hit rate. So like if the guys, think about the guys that went in
the late first round last year, like I mean, they're terrible. I'm excited about Pierce. Well, okay, let's relax. I'm excited about Pearsall, but I think could still go either way. Leggett, I mean, geez, God, yeah, that could go either way.
Yeah, and just even like before that, QJ and stuff. And these are just for the wide receivers, which is like a position that holds some value. Like there's some guards that go in the first round that you're like, what the hell was that? There's some safeties that go and they're like, what are we even doing here? Same thing with the linebackers. So to me, it's like people are obsessed with the hit rates, and I'll acknowledge that like Tyler Shuck, his hit rate is lower than Nick Manowari, who's going to be a total freak safety. But like a safety's not winning you the damn Super Bowl, you know? I mean, at some point we got to take on some risk. And I think with Shuck, he's just going to be laughed at and people are going to ignore him just because of his history in college. But I think his tape's good enough to like warrant having an opinion on him. And I think that he can do the scam well. Like the Ryan Tannehill, who obviously was good in his own right. But if you want to do the Shanahan stuff with Shuck, like Jared Goff, like that whole type of quarterback, like on a really cheap contract, and if it only takes a second round pick, like to me, this is like where the interesting part of the draft is. And I was just kind of surprised that this group was kind of as good as I was expecting, at least in comparison to Mr. Shedeur Sanders.
There's fewer and fewer Shanahan offenses because I think like the Sean Payton, sort of Detroit Lions tree is proliferating around the league. But there's still plenty of teams that like, yeah, we lose our starting quarterback, we run a Shanahan offense. We want that scam. So I think Tyler Shuck makes sense there. And yeah, shoot, even if he becomes a poor man's Ryan Tannehill, he's probably going to outkick like a second round value. Last thing, and I'm only going to ask you this because you brought the name up. But like, so a lot of this is also tangentially, you like these guys, but also maybe you're a little bit lower on Shedeur Sanders than sort of other folks out there.
Yeah, I think he's kind of in this range, and you kind of ask the question, like, what exactly are you looking for? Shedeur Sanders has better accuracy than Milroe by far. He's a little bit more mobile than Tyler Shuck is as well, but I'm just looking for the standout trait. And like the more I watch these absolute aliens in the playoffs, like the more you really have to like picture, okay, is my goal to like get eliminated in the wild card round? Then sure, I think that Shedeur Sanders could do something like that. But if your goal is to actually go to a conference championship, there is like a requirement right now of either being an elite processor with the arm strength like Matthew Stafford, or being a total alien that can kind of do both, like the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the NFL. And I just think that with Shedeur, just to me, I wouldn't even say he's a day one starter, even though he is like decent with his progressions. He's definitely accurate. That offense is just like was so lacking, so much screens. It was just this Y cross route over and over and over again. You didn't really see like a bunch of like variety of plays. You didn't see him like work under center very often. Like you don't see him in the zone read game very often as well. So I think that people are just like labeling him as like this day one high floor starter. I'm not sure about that. Like there's just the same play you watch over and over and over again on the Colorado offense. And then he was also obviously blessed with Travis Hunter, who's a complete freak in his own right. So yeah, I'm just not like labeling him as this like day one starter. I think that it would take some time for him to get up to speed with the NFL playbook. And I thought that Shuck and Milroe and Dart, I thought those guys had a little bit more translatable playbook to the NFL than what I saw from Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, that is interesting. I also found like my watch of Sanders to leave me wanting a little bit. I do like the accuracy. I like the ball placement. I think that's why people see that and they see day one impact,
Correct.
Starter. But there are other traits that I think need to catch up from a physical standpoint. Like forget about it. But I mean, just even like you mentioned, going under center, kind of the process of the entire offense, which like he can get into camp. He seems like a smart guy and picks that up like really, really well. I think that's all very possible. But yeah, the overall ceiling, I get that. And I'm just gonna get this like off my chest because this is something I could not say on Twitter because it's it's probably a little too charged. But I have found it very funny, Hayden, that there's been this again, this is last week when people are listening to this, but there's been reports from people like Dane Brugler talked about this. I think Todd McShay talked about this on their respective podcasts that like Sanders, not everybody liked the interview process, but then a lot of people who are Sanders defenders will say that they're like there's a clip going around from I think Mary Kay Cabot about the Browns really loved their interview and time with Shedeur Sanders. And it's just funny, like again, this is just something I've been thinking about, like we get so precious about this stuff during the draft process, but like, yeah, no like, I mean, that like the fact that the Browns in like, oh, that see, they said this, therefore you guys are wrong or you're whatever to say this. Like not everybody is for everybody. Let me tell you right now, like there's not a 100% approval rate for Matt Harmon. Okay. Like I'm not for everybody. Yeah. Thank you, Hayden. I appreciate it. But yeah, like there's not a 100% approval rating for Hayden Winks. I like you, Hayden. I enjoyed sitting next to you at the dinner we had at the Combine. Not everybody would. Okay. No. Like not everybody's for everybody. So again, we use this as like a weird monolithic thing. Like, oh, the league is down on Shedeur Sanders. Oh, you know what? Like a couple of folks probably didn't like hanging out with him. A couple of folks probably did. That's just life.
Yeah, it's totally it's true. He's not going to be for everybody. He also doesn't need to be. And these teams are used to personalities. Like I worked for the Chargers. I would hang around the locker room from time to time. These guys are nuts. Like, I mean, these guys are like the coolest kid at your high school times a million with money. They're going to have some personality. It's just that, like, to play in the NFL, like to think that you could like just your body can survive and you want to be this much of a psycho in the gym day after day to make it to the NFL. Yeah, these guys are just like built different. Like the NFL teams are used to this. At the end of the day, they're going to pick the player that's going to help them win, not be like nice. And I think everyone says that Shedeur Sanders does seem fairly nice, and he stays out of trouble. He works really hard. So to me, it's like just like, do you want to hang out with them? Then that's not really the point. And the GMs are going to overlook any of that noise, and they're just going to like basically pick who they think is going to help them save their job. They have a family. They want to win football games. They're not trying to hang out with Shedeur Sanders on the weekend because you would not hang out with Shedeur Sanders on the weekend. He's got a better people to hang out with.
Exactly. Yeah, that is the number one point. Yeah, these GMs are trying to save their jobs. They're not trying to get a drinking buddy or whatever. But my only thing is we don't need to be outraged at every like, oh my God, they didn't like him. How dare they? Most people don't like each other. It's totally fine.
Exactly.
Okay, Hayden, this has been absolutely fantastic. Really appreciate you doing this. Tell the people what you're working on right now, what they can go check out on your end.
Josh and I got mock drafts coming. Next week's going to be crazy with free agency. So we're going to post a single video for most of the free agency movement. And then after that, we're just going to go player by player and just do a 10 to 15 minute video for the prospects. We'll probably get to 20-ish wide receivers, about 5 to 10 quarterbacks, and then some of the first round talent out there. So yeah, the offseason to me is just like fascinating. Like we already know we can fast forward the Eagles and the Chiefs and the Bills, and they're going to be very good next year, but the off season's where we kind of have some imagination. And I find it fascinating.
Absolutely. It's a great time. And Josh and Hayden are two of the guys, their show is really, this is where, again, we try to do the same thing here, try to distinguish ourselves from the rest of the fantasy shows out there. These guys absolutely do it. Yeah. And you guys, your episodes are either 10 minutes, 12 minutes, or they're like 3 hours. So yeah, no in between for you guys over there. But again, make sure you subscribe to them on YouTube. That is going to do it for today's show. Appreciate everybody for sticking with us here. On Tuesday, we have a very, very special free agent tampering window reaction show with Yahoo senior NFL writer Jory Epstein. Why is it special? Because it is going to be live on YouTube at 5 p.m. Eastern. So after you've checked out Josh and Hayden and everything they're doing over there, go over to Yahoo Sports YouTube page, subscribe, and make sure to check out all of our videos. And we're going to hit your feed shortly after that on Tuesday night as well. So going to try to be as up to date as possible as a lot of things are happening in the moment. Be sure to check it all out. Until then, we are out.